The research station hung silent in the void between Mars and Jupiter, its metallic hull reflecting the distant sunlight. James Miller checked his oxygen levels one more time as his small shuttle approached the seemingly abandoned structure. After 6 months of detecting unusual energy signatures, Earth Command had finally authorized a closer investigation. Station Control, this is Earth Scout 7, requesting permission to dock. James broadcast on all frequencies. The silence that followed made him uneasy. His instruments showed power readings throughout the station, but no one responded to his hails. The docking procedure went smoothly, too smoothly. The station's automated systems engaged perfectly, as if they were expecting him. As the airlock cycled, James kept his hand near his sidearm. 12 years of space exploration had taught him that perfect situations often hid the deadliest surprises. The station's interior lights flickered to life as he entered. The air was breathable according to his suit's sensors, so he removed his helmet. The corridor ahead stretched in both directions, curved to follow the station's ring structure. Everything looked clean and well-maintained, but completely empty. "Hello," he called out, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "This is James Miller from Earth Command. Is anyone here?" A soft sound caught his attention. Something between a gasp and a whimper. James turned toward it, moving cautiously. The sound came from what appeared to be a research lab. As he approached the doorway, he saw movement inside. The alien stood about his height, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer like silk. Her large eyes were unlike anything he'd seen in the documented alien species. They looked almost like opals, with colors shifting and swirling within them. But what struck him most was her expression. She was crying. Tears ran down her face in glistening streams, but they seemed to catch the light in impossible ways, creating tiny rainbows where they fell. She made no move to run or defend herself. She just stood there, watching him with those extraordinary eyes, weeping. James slowly raised his hands to show he was peaceful. "I mean you no harm," he said clearly, hoping she had some way to understand him. "I'm from Earth. We detected your station." The alien woman took a shaky breath. When she spoke, her voice had a musical quality, and to his shock, she used perfect English. "I know what you are. I know where you're from." She took a step closer, her tears still flowing. "I've been waiting, hoping one of you would find us eventually." James felt his training kicking in. This was unprecedented. An unknown alien species, apparently waiting for humans, speaking English, and responding with intense emotion at first sight. Every protocol said he should retreat to his ship and call for backup. But something in her manner, in the way she looked at him with such raw emotion, made him stay. "Why were you waiting for us? And why?" He gestured to her tears. "Why does seeing me affect you this way?" She smiled then, even as fresh tears fell. "Because I can see what you are. What all humans are. And it's the most beautiful and terrible thing in all the galaxy." She moved to a console and pressed several controls. The lab's walls suddenly lit up with strange, shifting patterns of light, like countless threads of energy weaving through space. "My name is Ada," she said, looking back at him. "And I'm about to show you something that will change everything you think you know about humanity." James stared at the patterns, trying to make sense of them. "What am I looking at?" "The truth," Ada replied, her voice full of wonder and sadness. "The truth about why humanity is different from every other species we've ever encountered. The truth about why you scare so many of the galactic powers. And the truth about why some of us have been protecting your species in secret for centuries." The patterns continued to shift and dance on the walls, and James felt the weight of history shifting around him. He knew, in that moment, that nothing would ever be the same again. Ada's fingers moved across the control panel, and the shifting lights on the walls grew brighter. James watched as the threads of energy began to take on distinct colors, pulsing with a life of their own. The patterns reminded him of neural networks, but far more complex and beautiful. "What you're seeing," Ada explained, her opal eyes reflecting the dancing lights, are what we call soul threads. Every living being has them, but humans. She paused, touching a control that zoomed in on a particular cluster of threads. Humans are different. The display shifted to show two distinct images side by side. On the left was a simple pattern, a few dozen threads connecting in a basic network. On the right was an explosion of light and color, millions of threads interweaving in complex patterns that stretched far beyond the visible display. The left image shows the soul threads of a typical intelligent species, Ada said, her voice soft with wonder. The right shows a human's threads. Just one human. James stepped closer to the display, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. These connections, what do they mean? They are everything, Ada replied, wiping away a fresh tear. They are love, pain, memory, empathy. When a human feels joy, these threads light up. When they suffer, the threads darken but grow stronger. When they love, she touched another control, and the display showed two human patterns merging. The resulting light was almost blinding. Our scientists spent centuries trying to understand how your species developed this way, she continued. Most beings in the galaxy have simple connections, family bonds, maybe a few close friendships. But humans, she shook her head in amazement. You can form deep bonds with complete strangers. You weep for people you've never met. You sacrifice yourselves for abstract ideals. James thought about Earth's history, about firefighters rushing into burning buildings to save unknown lives, about people donating organs to strangers, about crowds spontaneously helping disaster victims. We just call that being human, he said quietly. Exactly. Ada's voice rose with excitement. It's so fundamental to your nature that you take it for granted. But do you know what happens when one human suffers? She adjusted the display again, showing a network of threads suddenly darkening. The pain echoes through all these connections. Thousands of humans, sometimes millions, feel an echo of that suffering, and instead of breaking you, it makes you stronger. James remembered the global outpouring of support after natural disasters, the worldwide protests against injustice, the way humans could unite in the face of tragedy. Is that why you were crying when you saw me? Ada nodded, her shimmering tears catching the light of the display. Imagine being able to see these threads all the time, to witness the raw beauty and pain of such deep connections. When I look at you, I see not just one being, but the echoes of millions of connections. It's overwhelming. She moved closer to the display, her hand hovering over the intricate pattern of human threads. But there's more. These connections aren't just passive. They're what gave your species its incredible resilience. When one human falls, others lift them up. When one human dreams, others help make it reality. You've survived countless near-extinction events because you never truly fight alone. James felt a chill run down his spine. You said some people are protecting our species. Protecting us from what? Ada's expression grew serious. There are those in the galaxy who fear these connections. They see them as a threat, a power they can't control. And others, her voice dropped to a whisper, others want to harness this power for themselves, no matter the cost. The lights in the lab suddenly dimmed, and a low alarm began to sound. Ada's face paled to an almost white shade of blue. And it seems, she said, her voice tight with fear, that they finally found us. The alarm's pulsing grew more urgent as Ada rushed to secure the lab's systems. James moved to the observation window, scanning the star-filled void for signs of approaching ships. How much time do we have? He asked. Minutes, maybe less. Ada replied, her fingers flying over the controls. I need to show you everything before they arrive. The Watcher's history with humanity goes back further than you can imagine. The lab's displays shifted again, showing Earth through different periods of history. James saw ancient civilizations, great wars, moments of triumph and devastating failures, but all viewed through the lens of these glowing soul threads. "We've been observing Earth since your Stone Age," Ada explained, bringing up images of early human settlements. The soul threads were visible even then, connecting families, tribes, and eventually entire civilizations. At first, we thought the connections were a primitive trait that would fade as you evolved. Most species lose their deeper bonds as they advance technologically. But humans, she smiled, humans did the opposite. The displays showed the threads growing more complex through time, spreading and strengthening. Every hardship made the connection stronger. Every challenge brought more humans together. The Black Death, world wars, the climate crisis. Events that should have shattered your species instead forged stronger bonds. James watched as the images moved through history, showing how human connections had adapted to each new technology. "The Internet," Ada said, pointing to a massive surge in the thread patterns. It was like watching a neural network suddenly expand across an entire planet. Most species use technology to isolate themselves. Humans used it to connect in entirely new ways. "But why keep this secret?" James asked. "Why not make contact earlier?" Ada's expression darkened. "Because of the harvesters. They're the ones coming now." She brought up new images, stark, geometric ships that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They discovered humanity's unique traits centuries ago, during Earth's industrial age. They saw the power of human connections as a resource to be extracted. The implications hit James like a physical blow. They wanted to harvest these connections. How? By forcing humans into conditions of extreme emotion. Pain, fear, love, sacrifice. The threads grow strongest under pressure. Ada's voice shook with anger. "The Watchers were created to prevent this. We've been redirecting the harvesters, hiding evidence of human uniqueness, protecting Earth while humanity grew strong enough to defend itself." The displays showed countless small interventions through history, strange lights diverting invasion forces, mysterious malfunctions preventing detection, subtle manipulations keeping humanity safe in its cosmic cradle. "That's why our first contact with alien life has been so limited," James realized. "You've been controlling it." "We had to," Ada replied. "Humanity needed time to develop its own defenses. The connections that make you special also make you vulnerable until you understand how to use them." She paused, looking at him intently. "But now we're out of time. The harvesters have found this station, and with it, proof of what humans truly are." The station shuddered as something large made contact with the outer hull. Ada quickly began transferring data to a small crystal device. "Everything you need to know is in here. The true history, the science of soul threads, the harvester's weaknesses. You have to get this back to Earth." "I'm not leaving you here," James protested, but Ada cut him off. "You must. The Watchers have protected humanity for millennia. I can buy you time to escape, but this information has to reach Earth." She pressed the crystal into his hand. "Your species is ready now, ready to understand what you truly are, and ready to fight for your place in the galaxy." The station shook again, more violently this time. The sound of metal tearing echoed through the corridors. Ada pushed James toward the exit. "Go. Show your people the truth. And remember, what makes humans different isn't just your capacity for connection, it's your ability to choose what you connect to. Choose wisely." James clutched the crystal and ran, the weight of centuries of hidden history in his hand, and the sound of the harvester's arrival close behind. James sprinted through the station's corridors, the crystal clutched tightly in his hand. Behind him, the sounds of the harvester's intrusion grew louder, screeching metal and rhythmic thuds that shook the entire structure. His ship was docked 2 sections away, but the station's layout had begun to feel like a maze in his panic. The overhead lights flickered and died, plunging the corridor into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a deep red glow. Through the walls, James could hear the hiss of atmosphere venting from breached sections of the station. "Turn left at the next junction." Ada's voice came through the station's comm system. "They're cutting through the main docking bay. You'll have to use the emergency airlock. James followed her directions, his boots magnetic locking to the floor as the artificial gravity began to fail. What about you? What are they going to do to you? The harvesters can't extract information from watchers, Ada replied, her voice calm despite the chaos. Our neural patterns are too different. That's why they need. She didn't finish the sentence. A new sound filled the station. A low, vibrating hum that made James's teeth ache. The emergency lights revealed something seeping through the seams in the walls, a dark, oil-like substance that moved against gravity. Don't let it touch you. Ada's warning crackled through the failing comm system. It's how they track the soul threads. Keep moving. James picked up speed, using the magnetic boots to launch himself forward in the failing gravity. The dark liquid seemed to follow him, reaching out with tendril-like extensions. He could see his emergency exit ahead, a small airlock meant for repairs and emergencies. The station's internal sensors must have still been working because the airlock door opened as he approached. James practically dove inside, slamming the control panel to seal the door behind him. Through the small window, he could see the dark liquid gathering, probing for a way in. Ada, I'm in the airlock, he reported, quickly checking his suit seals. What are these things? The harvesters aren't what you think. Ada's voice was breaking up now. They're not alive in the way we understand it. They're collectors, gatherers of experiences. They want humanity's connections because they have none of their own. The outer airlock door opened, revealing James's ship still safely docked nearby. He prepared to make the short spacewalk when Ada spoke again, her voice urgent. James, listen carefully. The crystal contains everything, but there's one thing you need to know now. The harvesters will follow you. They'll follow the threads they can see in you. You'll need to. Static overwhelmed her voice for a moment. The dampening field. Instructions are in the crystal. Don't let them track you back to. The communication cut off completely. Through the station's windows, James could see new ships arriving. Angular black vessels that seemed to swallow the starlight around them. His ship's auto-start sequence had already begun, thanks to Ada's final gift. James pushed off from the airlock, using his suit's thrusters to guide him to his ship. As he flew, he saw movement through the station's windows. The dark liquid had spread throughout the structure, and in its flow, he could see something that made his blood run cold. Where it passed, the soul threads that Ada had shown him became visible to his naked eye. But instead of their natural glow, they were being twisted, pulled, transformed into something dark and wrong. He reached his ship and quickly cycled through the entry procedures. As the cabin pressurized, he caught one last glimpse of the research station. The harvester ships had fully surrounded it, their black surfaces now alive with stolen light. The captured essence of connections being drained and stored. I'll get the warning to Earth, he promised quietly, initiating the launch sequence. Your sacrifice won't be for nothing. As his ship broke away from the station, James could swear he saw the soul threads stretching between him and where he had left Ada. Not broken, not yet, but straining against the darkness that sought to harvest them. The race to Earth had begun, and humanity's very nature hung in the balance. The ship's engines hummed steadily as James studied the crystal's contents on his main display. His small craft was running dark, taking an indirect route back to Earth to avoid detection. Every few minutes, he checked the sensors for signs of pursuit, but so far, the harvesters hadn't followed. The crystal contained centuries of watcher observations, and as James read, the true scope of human uniqueness began to unfold. The soul threads weren't just connections. They were the source of humanity's most defining characteristics. He pulled up a watcher analysis of human art. The display showed a symphony orchestra, but overlaid with the familiar glowing threads. As the musicians played, their threads synchronized, creating patterns of incredible complexity. The audience's threads responded, resonating with the music, forming a vast network of shared emotion and experience. That's why our art moves us so deeply, James whispered to himself. We're not just hearing it or seeing it, we're connecting through it. The next file showed footage from a disaster zone, a massive earthquake that had struck a major city. But through the watcher's vision, the tragedy revealed something extraordinary. As buildings fell and chaos erupted, the soul threads between people grew stronger, brighter. Strangers helped strangers, forming instant, powerful connections. The threads of those who were rescued remained connected to their saviors, sometimes for life. A notification flashed on his screen. The ship's AI had finished analyzing the technical data about soul threads. The results were stunning. The threads weren't just metaphysical, they had a measurable impact on physical reality. Strong emotional connections could actually influence probability, slightly bending the laws of physics through what the Watchers called collective quantum resonance. That explains so much, James realized. He thought of all the times humanity had beaten impossible odds, survived catastrophes that should have ended them. Their connections literally changed what was possible. The crystal contained more practical information too. The Watchers had developed technology to detect and measure the threads, to hide them from the harvesters, and even to protect them. But most importantly, they had discovered that humans could learn to see and control these connections themselves. James opened another file, this one showing human children. Their threads were especially bright and numerous, reaching out to everything around them. As they grew older, most humans learned to subconsciously suppress their awareness of the connections, a defense mechanism against being overwhelmed. But with training, that awareness could be restored. The ship's sensors beeped a warning. A distant energy signature matched the harvester ship's profile. James quickly began the process the crystal had outlined for activating his ship's dampening field. The technology would hide his soul threads, making him nearly invisible to the harvester's detection methods. As he worked, he contemplated humanity's place in the galaxy. Other species had technologies far beyond Earth's current capabilities, but humans had something far more valuable: the ability to form deep, meaningful connections with virtually anything. That gift had shaped every aspect of human civilization. The dampening field hummed to life, and the energy signature on his sensors grew fainter. But James knew this was just the beginning. Once he reached Earth, humanity would face a choice: continue hiding these connections or learn to fully embrace them, with all the vulnerability and strength they brought. He opened the last file Ada had marked as critical. It showed a time-lapse of human history, focused on the threads themselves. With each passing generation, the connections had grown stronger, more numerous, more complex. Humanity wasn't just maintaining these bonds, they were evolving, becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. "We're not just connected," James said to himself, watching the beautiful display of humanity's growing network of bonds. "We're becoming more connected." And that's what they're afraid of. The Earth was still hours away, but James knew that every minute counted. Humanity needed to understand what they truly were before the harvesters arrived in force. Because once humans learned to see and control these connections consciously, they would become something entirely new and incredibly powerful. Earth's defense fleet surrounded James's ship as he approached the planet. Under normal circumstances, a lone vessel running dark would have been treated with extreme suspicion, but he had transmitted Ada's emergency codes ahead. Now, as his ship docked with Space Command headquarters, he could see the controlled chaos unfolding. The station's main conference room was packed with military leaders, scientists, and government officials from every major nation. The crystal's data was already being projected on the massive screens surrounding them. James stood at the center, still in his flight suit, watching their reactions as they processed the truth about humanity. "These soul threads," General Roberts spoke first, his weathered face illuminated by the displays. "You're saying every human has them?" "Yes," James confirmed. "And they're not just passive connections. They're the source of our greatest strengths, and potentially our greatest vulnerability." Dr. Lin, Earth's leading xenobiologist, stepped forward. "The data suggests we can learn to see these threads ourselves. Some humans already do. unconsciously. Artists, empaths, those we call naturally intuitive, they're actually sensing these connections. But the harvesters, another official interrupted. How long do we have? James brought up Ada's final tactical assessment. Days, maybe hours. They'll follow my trail eventually, even with the dampening field. And when they come, they'll come in force. The room erupted in debate. Some argued for immediate military preparation, others for attempting diplomatic contact. A few suggested trying to hide or suppress humanity's connections to make Earth less attractive to the harvesters. We can't hide this anymore. James raised his voice above the chaos. And we shouldn't. Ada and the Watchers protected us until we were ready to understand what we are. Now we have to choose how to use that knowledge. He activated the final simulation from the crystal. The display showed two possible futures. In one, humanity attempted to suppress their connections, leading to a gradual dimming of their soul threads and a loss of what made them unique. In the other, they embraced and developed their ability, their collective power growing exponentially. The harvesters aren't just coming for our connections, James explained. They're coming because they fear what we're becoming. Every generation of humans forms stronger bonds, more complex networks. We're evolving into something the galaxy has never seen. Dr. Lin nodded excitedly. These readings suggest our connections are already affecting physical reality on a quantum level. If we learn to consciously control this ability, we could be gods, someone whispered. Or we could be monsters, General Roberts countered. Power like this is neither good nor evil, James interrupted. Ada said our greatest strength isn't just our capacity for connection. It's our ability to choose what we connect to. We can use these bonds to build or destroy, to heal or harm. The choice has always been ours. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity stood at a crossroads. They could deny their nature and hide, embrace it and fight, or find another way entirely. The station's alarms suddenly blared to life. On the main screen, sensors showed multiple objects emerging from faster-than-light travel near Jupiter. The harvesters had arrived sooner than expected. We're out of time, General Roberts announced. We need to make a decision now. James stepped forward, his voice clear and determined. We don't hide. We don't run. We show them exactly what humanity is capable of when we stand together. He turned to Dr. Lin. How quickly can we teach people to see the threads? With the Watchers' techniques. Hours for basic awareness. Days for control. Then we start now, James said. Broadcast the training globally. Let every human who can learn to see what connects us. The harvesters want to harvest individuals. Let's show them what happens when humanity acts as one. The room filled with determined nods. Orders were given, signals sent. Around the planet, humans would soon begin to see the glowing threads that had always connected them. The real question was, what would they choose to do with that knowledge? Dawn broke over Earth as millions of humans experienced their first conscious glimpse of the soul threads. Thanks to the Watchers' techniques, transmitted globally through every available network, people began to see the connections that had always existed between them. Cities glowed with newfound awareness. The threads, once invisible, now lit up the world like an intricate web of starlight. Parents saw their bonds with children shine like golden rivers. Friends witnessed the sturdy bridges of their relationships. Even strangers on the street could see the delicate strands that connected all of humanity. In Space Command, James watched the harvester fleets approach on the main display. But now he could see something else too. A growing network of lights spreading across Earth. Billions of humans becoming aware of their connections simultaneously. They're across the lunar orbit, General Roberts reported. Multiple ships, larger than anything we've encountered. But Dr. Lin was smiling as she studied her readings. Look at the energy patterns. The conscious awareness of our connections is amplifying them. The quantum effects are growing exponentially. The first harvester ship entered Earth's orbit, its dark surface rippling with hungry anticipation. Their sensors would be showing them a feast of connections, more powerful than anything they'd ever encountered. But they weren't seeing everything. James touched his earpiece, where a small crystal, a piece of the one Ada had given him, helped him see the bigger picture. They think they're seeing our connections at full strength. They're not. On the surface below, something extraordinary was happening. As humans became aware of their threads, they began to consciously direct them. Parents strengthened bonds with children. Communities reinforced connections with neighbors. The threads weren't just visible now. They were being actively woven together. The harvester ships deployed their dark, oil-like substance into the atmosphere, expecting to begin their collection. But where it touched the glowing threads, something unexpected happened. Instead of draining the connections, the substance itself began to change. "They're transforming it," Dr. Lin gasped, watching her instruments. "The human connections are so strong, so numerous, they're converting the harvester's own technology." The dark liquid began to glow, infected by the very thing it was meant to steal. The harvesters, for the first time in their existence, felt something new: connection. Their ships, designed to absorb and store stolen bonds, were instead becoming conduits for genuine ones. James remembered Ada's words about humanity's gift being infectious. Now he understood. The harvesters hadn't come to destroy humanity. They had come to be changed by it. The main harvester ship's transmission cut through all frequencies. What is this?" James stepped forward. "This is humanity, not as victims to be harvested, but as a bridge. You've spent millennia stealing connections. Now you can learn to make your own." The dark ships hung in orbit, their surfaces now rippling with colors instead of shadows. The very nature of their beings was transforming, touched by humanity's gift for forming genuine bonds. On Earth, the changes continued. Species that had long lived alongside humans, dogs, cats, even plants, began showing their own threads, awakened by humanity's conscious connections. The gift was spreading, evolving, growing into something new. In the days that followed, other alien species arrived. Some came in fear, others in curiosity. All of them found themselves changed by contact with humanity's web of connections. The galaxy was transforming, one relationship at a time. Months later, James stood in the rebuilt research station where he had first met Ada. The Watchers had emerged from hiding, no longer needed as humanity's secret guardians. Through a viewport, Earth glowed like a jewel, its connections now visible even from space. A familiar figure approached. Ada, her opal eyes shining with joy instead of tears. "You were right," James said, watching ships from a dozen species dock with the station. "Our connections changed everything." "No," Ada replied, touching the window where Earth's light danced. "Your ability to choose those connections changed everything. Humanity showed the galaxy that true connection can't be taken. It has to be freely given and consciously grown." Below them, Earth continued to glow, its light reaching out to touch the stars. Not just a beacon, but a bridge to a more connected future. The end.